Good evening and welcome to the Balie. My name is Veronica Baas and tonight we will be talking about the war against Ukraine and in particular how Ukraine and President Zelensky have managed to gain support from their allies. This month and perhaps even this week might turn out to be decisive with the support package in both the US and the EU being at stake. So we will tonight look at how things have turned out on the world stage, and we will be looking back, but we will also be looking forward, speculating even a little bit, but it will be very much informed speculation because I'm joined by two experts. I'm very happy that they will be talking here. They are André Kornichuk and Jelle Baartmans, and we will also talk to Floris Akkerman via video very shortly. First, let me introduce André Kornichuk. He is a policy analyst at the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, and he's originally from Ukraine, but he has lived and studied all over Europe, and he did his PhD on democratic legitimacy in the European Union, and now he is focusing on international relations between the EU and neighboring countries. And I have asked André to prepare an introduction for us, and I've asked him to focus on the strategies that Zelensky has been employing the last 2 years, and also on the people who have helped him securing support. André, would you come to the podium and start your presentation? Give a warm applause.
Thank you, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. If you allow me, I think I'll put some time frame so I'm not over the time. Yeah, it's so in a sense, I was asked to reflect on the strategy that Ukraine employed for the last 2 years. And looking into the future, and I think one important thing to mention here is also I'm coming right from Brussels. So obviously the weight of the upcoming European Council and then the possible decision on opening of the accession talks or the discussion around the Ukraine facility in aid, it looms heavily around everyone, including Ukraine, but also the member states and the European community. But to sort of to facilitate a bit today's discussion, I also have some slides to show because I think that the pictures and images very much transmit the success that Ukraine had when it comes to strategic communication and the way it has communicated with its partners, allies, but also tried to defeat the aggressor. So now I'm trying. Yes, so I think for today's discussion it would be quite relevant and I think interesting also to understand by what do we mean by securing support. And I think if you look at the proposals that I set up here, I start from those immediate ones on the 24th of February 2022, and then we'll be looking a bit on medium to long term. But very shortly, this securing support spans across a very different spectrum. The military support to defend itself against an aggressor, it's self-explanatory in a way, because Ukraine obviously there was a huge difference in terms of military capabilities between the aggressor and the one who has to defend itself. Although Ukraine obviously through the last decade, when officially the war actually started in 2014 with the invasion of Crimea, invasion of Donbass, Ukraine built certain capability, but it was not incomparable. It needed support to sustain its defense war effort. The economic support, because obviously the economy collapses when you enter the war. It's very difficult to sustain the same levels. And you have to provide basic public service, but also you have this macroeconomic stability that you need to ensure. The humanitarian support. People, well, from the pictures you see, from perhaps some of you even traveled to Ukraine, see before your eyes, the way Russia wages the war, it's the brutality unseen in decades. So the humanitarian aspect is of paramount sort of importance in that case. The political support. right away, the Ukrainian elites and President Zelensky in particular, I think they clearly understood that they need to pinpoint the direction they are going. And obviously understanding that the EU accession offers the only existential exit from this situation. So the country to remain a democratic, prosperous, possibly safe, stable country in the future, they have to secure this path to EU membership, because there's no other way. The other way is the Ukraine disappearing actually from the sort of the maps and history books. And the last one, which I think sometimes is maybe overlooked a bit, but what I called ethnocultural support, I think it's this unique understanding of recognizing Ukraine as a sovereign nation with distinct history and unique cultural DNA. In one of the books that I co-authored, one of the chapters after the full-scale invasion, I sort of called it Rediscovery of Ukraine. I hope that many of us gathered today kind of well understood sort of what Ukraine is, its history, its people, society, but a lot looked Ukraine through the prism of Russia, through the prism of being a kind of a fringe actor, not even possibly a sovereign nation. And then what kind of support we're looking forward? So long-term strategic goals, I think many of us are clear here and understand what do we mean by it. But what does Ukraine want from these? It's EU membership and NATO membership. EU membership, it's definitely important for rebuild, transformation, and democratic development of Ukraine. NATO membership is a security guarantee and arguably the biggest and the only real deterrence factor against Russia if the war stops. Coming back, waging another one, because the probability is extremely high. Short to medium-term goals. Here we look basically at what is happening now. So this is the EU's funding to support Ukraine. There's currently, as you see, 110 billion in funds, which are coupled together for Israel, Ukraine as security needs, as it's phrased, discussed between the Republicans and Democrats. But without the support, obviously, Ukraine does not have time. Every time is extremely costly. It's paid with human life. So any type of support in terms of this macroeconomic stability, but also in terms of the military dimension, is extremely important. Ukraine facility, the 50 billion that the EU will vote for and promises, is a bit stuck at the moment again. But this should be, again, something where you have a bit of a medium-term solution of the EU of providing stable assistance to Ukraine at the time where it really needs it to succeed in terms of its resilience against an aggressor. There's obviously the short to medium goals, the various bilateral agreements and support that are being constantly negotiated with states, be it UK, Germany, or the Netherlands. Short to medium-term goals, you could also speak something of, as an example for you, Alliance of Defense Industries and Defense Fund, which Ukraine has set up to encourage the defense industry sort of to contribute to building the capacity of Ukrainian army even more, to repel the aggressor in the future, to become a more capable security provider, actor for itself, maybe going beyond that for Europe and even beyond that. And the Ukraine peace formula, this is something that President Zelensky and Ukraine actively tries to promote on international arena, basically setting up all the criteria that it set out for the possible peace agreement or the end of the war to come. So basically, if you want to understand kind of what are the criteria for Ukraine to be able to be ready to sit at the negotiation table, you go to the Ukraine peace formula. And there are things that are basic: territorial integrity, 1991 borders, Russia pays for everything it has done in Ukraine in terms of its crimes and is being prosecuted. So these are kind of very core and basic things, but it's still something that Ukraine has to fight for because not necessarily everyone is on board. For instance, the question of frozen Russian assets, what you do with them, how you go with it. So there are a lot of difficulties, and this is something that Ukraine will continue to be heavily involved on a diplomatic front. And now we go to the last 2 years, and perhaps why and how Ukraine managed to garner the support and how it built. if you see at this picture, a lot is built certainly on the charisma of the president and the way that he comes from the background he comes, which is entertainment, the way he positions himself, the way he makes it personal. His party is called Servant of the People. And I think basically he does show it in the images, that he's servant of the people. He's one of the many. Yes, I'm the president, but I take selfies, I wear casual clothes. Why I put President Macron, at some point there was a lot of jokes that he tried sort of to emulate and make a casual Friday in Paris, and people laughed him off, saying that it's very artificial. Again, because Zelensky, it's very natural to him. Yes, he's an actor. Yes, he's a businessman. Yes, he has a lot of sort of experience in the showbiz, but in a sense, it was never sort of a something that the audience watching felt that it's artificial. If we would put an old type of politician. So, for instance, I'm not necessarily sure if, like previous President Poroshenko could really pull this off, like a change of complete image, or someone like Yulia Tymoshenko, which she tries, but she's been ridiculed by the younger generation in some points. So, in sense, it's a kind of natural. But unfortunately, sometimes it also backfires. This photo on the right side, Vilnius NATO summit, where Zelensky seems to stand alone and isolated. It also circulated around the media, saying that like Ukraine is isolated, no one wants to talk to him. It was probably just a better moment of a transition where his wife was again talking to sort of other individuals there. But it's a very tricky landscape. So the war that Russia wages, it's also a social media. It's like an information warfare. It's probably something we haven't really seen to that extent in any other wars in the past. If we go, so all the time he has the casual clothing. So he never dropped the sort of semi-military attire. Always, whether it's a parliament, whether it's going to the Netherlands, Canada, UK, being in Brussels. Always staying true to that concept that I embody it, sort of, I live by it, by this word. But it was inherently, I think it was a kind of a breath of fresh air for many, also to understand. Be sort of more direct with the president. And you also saw this. He had a very direct, straightforward communication. He clearly always said what Ukraine wants, why the time is of essence. So it's almost like he was not doing really politics. Because in Ukraine, for many, the post-Soviet states, politicians usually were seen, and probably still are seen in many cases, as the ones that are distant from the nation, quite insincere, maybe corrupt, not really representing the nation, someone that just uses business sort of to set up certain position. And this, I think, shifts also as I didn't put it here, but when the invasion started, he was taking a selfie recording with his team on the background, saying that we are not leaving the capital, we are staying here, and that I don't need a ride, I need ammunition. Like quotes which possibly in 10, 15 years someone will issue his speeches, that will be something, well, maybe Churchillian, maybe it's still even too much, but there's a lot of these kind of phrases and things that already are part of the popular culture. So, and he stayed true to it. And now sort of compare what Putin was doing. So again, taking selfies with Mark Rutte here on the planes, F-16s that should be delivered. A flag that is signed, and apparently in the Congress, people were standing ovations for unprecedented amount of time. Some people within the Congress commented that like for 30 years, when they're in Congress, they have never witnessed like that type of standing ovation. So he simply kind of took over. He was like a rock star type of communication. But it was very smart, because I think the Ukraine understood that they can use the skills that he has as a president also, but also his genuine sort of culture to do. So there was a lot of emphasis on that, on Ukraine being this type of close to the people, close to the politicians, close to the European values, close to the European family. while Putin at the same time sits at a long table. So obviously, if you would like to look for some memes and jokes, this table has thousands now, Photoshop different, interesting, where people doing like ice skating and barbecues on this table and etc. But that's a smart move from Ukraine as well, because what you ridicule your enemy at the first year. So Russia is no longer perceived as this potent army, strong leader, but you say like, what, Putin is even afraid to like meet Scholz eye to eye, even his somewhat ally, so President of Azerbaijan Aliyev, standing like a carpet away. So at the beginning it worked extremely well, because it's like juxtaposing completely two different images. And the first one is a modern one, and it's simply like you look at Putin and someone who could be well substituted with Lenin on a mausoleum on a sort of Red Square, it seems like, with old school. But it has to be said that while the government was doing a lot of sort of work, at the same time, it was an effort for the whole of society. Because also the Ukrainians, whether they were in or outside, and here examples from Amsterdam, from London, from Berlin, where Ukrainians took it to the streets, and they also demanded certain things. They also asked for support. They perhaps thanked for support, but it's all should be viewed in a certain ecosystem. It's not only that the government is doing its work, but the civil society, individual citizens are doing their part as well. That is why it was so effective, because it was genuinely one coherent message coming from all the Ukrainian society, whether it's top to the ones who children and so on. Other thing that was extremely successful is also getting these images and to the mainstream media or traditional media maybe, and you again see going in different directions from maybe those newspapers and those publications that have somewhat renowned position like Time or The Economist, to going the other way, like the Vogue, which sort of any person perhaps not following political life. So again, it was by some viewed as a bit of a controversial at one point, whether it was a good moment for that type of outlet to be approached the presidential family. But what they did is actually they shown the real face of the war with a very tired first lady. And this is, again, as a weapon, using this kind of communication is extremely sort of down-to-earth and successful. You wouldn't find anything like that in Russia. Or you see it in Russia, but you understand it's very artificial. It's like a cinema, it's created, and here it's just bringing you like the genuine, and a lot of sort of the audience normally likes to have that real feel that it's true what I'm watching. And another important thing, unprecedented, I think, maybe someone knows such case, I do not know, is the country undergoing rebranding during a full-scale war. Rebranding of its image. So on the right, Ukraine now was one of the concepts that was prior to the full-scale invasion, mainly focused on attracting tourists and going into that direction where you perhaps go on the standard, typical way where countries want to promote them as a having historical legacy, being attractive to foreigners, putting them on a sort of global touristic map. But then you go with Be Brave Like Ukraine, which was, I think, extremely smart way to go about it. Also because one of the better or most famous Ukrainian PR agencies was also involved in that. And Be Brave Like Ukraine, it speaks very much to the core of one's soul. It encourages you to do something. It shows you a path, like be brave. Something like think different, Apple. Impossible is nothing, Adidas. So no countries did it like that. It's usually the brands that wanted to sell something went into that directions. So in a way, it's like the brand that says like you can take that step as well. Be brave like Ukraine. Help us, assist us. You can, because we can, you can. But also other smart things, Banksy murals in Ukraine on destroyed, but then sort of shown as mixing culture with tragedy. But again, it's something, let's say, unorthodox way of going about it, and also positioning certain messages. Perhaps dealing with something, which I come back to, which is a matter of time. People getting used to or fatigued with anything. Be it a full-scale war, be it something even positive. Look, the postal service, so the postmarks, but also the bracelet. So, for instance, adapting messages. The bracelet is from Azovstal. So. When the Azovstal, when Mariupol was eventually taken, but it was still kind of defending itself for a lot of months. You heard comparisons about the famous 300, the Spartans. So again, using images that people relate to around the world. They know from history, they know from the upbringing, they know from... but these bracelets are from the metal that was still produced in the Azovstal, in the Mariupol area. So by buying this bracelet, the person that buys it, contributes with some financial means to Ukraine, but it has something to remember. It's something physical. So they went in. So this is partially like one of the few examples how you could also sort of encourage and make it maybe a transactional relationship in the sense that it's not the person is I'm only giving away, getting nothing, but getting something priceless that perhaps look and I'm happy I did what I did, sort of supporting Ukraine. Other things, more on the, there's a very interesting recent report that went out from the Chatham House, from one of the Ukrainian experts, where she delves very deep and explains how jokes, laughter, and irony are used as weapons of war. And Ukrainians are very good at it. They're also very good at joking at themselves, but I think it's also a matter of dealing with huge trauma. So it's one of the elements of processing. So sometimes you hear people perhaps say, oh boy, how can you keep such a good mood? Well, we keep it on, maybe not on myself, but those who are actually sitting in the trenches, etc. They keep that resilience partially because it's like an instrument of dealing with that huge trauma. But the Ghost of Kyiv, so after some time, it's famously, there was a pilot that shot down a lot of planes, Russian planes, when the Kyiv was being tried to they encircled. In the end, probably, allegedly, this was he never existed. It was a couple of pilots, but that image was very much needed at one point during the war to project certain power, success, but also to have a hero of Ukraine, sort of that, because the planes question, the closing the skies from the very beginning, Ukraine was very vulnerable on that front. So this is another example of showing that no, we can fight. We have nothing. We have less planes. We don't have air defense, but we still can cope with a largely superior air force. The pickles and the granny. There was a very interesting sort of report at the beginning that allegedly a granny, when she saw a Russian drone, she thrown a jar of pickles and was able sort of to target it successfully. So, and people saying like, if a granny on a balcony can do it, everyone can do it. So it's also part of this ridicule of the Russian army. And I think it worked well because after first year of the war, I had a research visit to the Baltic Defense College, which brings a lot of different military men from and women from different parts of the world. And by sort of patches, I saw people from US, Canada, Baltic states, sitting together at the table and joking about Russia, about their doctrines, about their prospects as an army. I think 1 year, 2 years before, you wouldn't see that. So they were actually laughing and making jokes of it. So for the first 2 years, this attempts like that the granny is successful, everyone. And Ukraine is smart because for decades it knew its enemy well. it knows like its own hand, Russia. Also its disinformation. So it learned how to cope with it, how to sort of approach it, and in a way how to do it. So there were a lot of things like mixing songs, Catch Bridge on Fire, which was based on actually a football song. Quickly just skipping memes. a very successful. You lost a submarine in a 3-day land war against a country without a navy. Then Putin seeing Rutte and Zelensky and sort of sad with planes going. Or popular culture is I think it's also a very good, and you see it's called the UA meme forces. So again, civil society taking on that role of targeting disinformation and information of Russia. So Avdiivka currently, which is being one of the hotspots of the war, and Game of Thrones, or the right one exemplifies why the counter-offensive has gone as it has gone, but it uses the Lord of the Rings. So for a free Ukraine, why is he counterattacking so slowly? Who knows? We gave him the minimum of what he needed. So why is he staring at us now? Can you move faster? So it's basically Ukraine didn't really have the weapons it needed to move quite fast. Yes, and I'll just perhaps show you also, which can be discussed later in a sense, the circle of Zelensky, which in one way or another contributes to these sort of strategy, and very much there's a political axis, all of them from different ministries, as well as the military axis. Valery Zaluzhny, who's the commander-in-chief, obviously is the most known, but Kirilo Budanov, who's the chief of defense intelligence, is also quite. There are a lot of people who became media stars as well, in a sense. So you see also the war. So the war gives you that. And the last thing is this is the last slide to finish. So what's next, and when we can also discuss later what's working and what's not working. So for 2 years, indeed, it worked, but it seems there comes a time where you need to come up with other solutions. And I'm happy later to elaborate what I think would be, because there seems to be this type of sort of communication that was successful. It's not getting the same results as it got, and you see even these articles from Time, like nobody believes in our victory, like do nobody, suggesting that almost Zelensky's alone. Believing the victory, where a lot of people are now started hesitating and not supportive and not sort of bringing on board. So kind of suggesting that perhaps there's no more such resilience present, which I think is not the case. But anyways, this points you to this difficult point where we are now, 2 years into the war, where perhaps you need to move from that type of communication you had, you garnered support. So what do you do next? How you maintain it so you don't have your most crucial aid and assistance blocked. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Please take a seat. And I'll also ask Jelle Baartmans here. Please join us as well. You work at the Dutch think tank Ramp op Rusland, and you are specialized in international relations of Eastern Europe and Russia, focusing on the economic transitions in Eastern Central Europe. Welcome. Thanks a lot, André. You said it. It's a new time in the war, and I wrote down what you said. Time is very important. We are going to discuss the international stage, but I would just wanted to go back to the Ukraine very briefly, because we're at the brink of a new winter. What you say, time is very important. What is if you look at the coming few months, what might happen in that time?
So I try to be maybe more brief, because I already had 15 minutes, and we are two of us, so I think we can sort of see how we add some information. Obviously, there are two angles and two dimensions to look at. The previous winter already shown the prospects for the following one. We might expect attacks on critical infrastructure still. Why not? The Russians are building their capacity for drones, such as Shahed drones or other drones. So on that scene, like attacks on critical importance of protecting. So the military dimension is crucial, because Ukraine still needs Western support, or international support, to be even more correct on this front, to maintain an effective war effort. So to stabilize the front, to move across the front. I think that's nothing new. So it has to continue. It tries to build up its capacity for its own military-industrial complex, but it takes time. It's for many countries it took a lot of years. So that is one dimension. The other dimension is certainly the humanitarian, because I mentioned the public services. Again, very much the provision of public services in Ukraine is financed from that support that has been given by EU, the US. So the state, to function, needs that. So if we really cut those things, we are obviously running into more trouble that we would want in Ukraine to end up with.
Yes, because Jelle, you listened to the talk as well. It seems like Zelensky and Ukraine have been very successful in gaining support. If you look at the situation right now, do you think that it has been translating in success, or how do you evaluate what's happening at this moment?
Well, indeed, I agree. If we're talking about the coming winter still, military support is crucial. That's the most important part. Last April, the EU promised 1 billion rounds of ammunition for 1 year to come, and they're not going to make it. And it's not a financial problem. It's not a problem of political will. It's a problem of capacity. Just look at the other side. Russia just published its draft budget for next year, and it's I think 30% is going to the military sector. So they are able to simply move to a war economy, and in the West we are still dealing with political processes, with market economies. So it's all about the processes and the capacities. Well, as you said, Ukraine is trying to ramp up its own defensive industry, but this is going to take time. The EU realizes this because actually, if you look at the plans that Borrell proposed for military support for Ukraine, it also includes supporting...
Who is Borrell?
The High Representative for Foreign Affairs of the European Union. It also includes plans to support Ukraine building its own defensive industry. And well, when it comes to the general support for Ukraine, in your introduction you mentioned that these weeks might be decisive. I don't think they will be decisive. Yes, of course, Ukraine is interested in quick support. But I'm quite surprised and a bit annoyed by the way the narrative shifted in the past few months when it comes to support for Ukraine, because I think just a few months ago we were in a situation where people in the West were quite optimistic. We supported Ukraine, and Ukraine made some progress on the battlefield as well. So Russia would never be able to maintain this because they were killing so much people. And now, more or less, you suddenly see a situation in which, I mean, I know that's how newspapers sell, but where people start thinking, well, what is the support for Ukraine worth? Russia is always going to have more people and more materials. So isn't it just money that's going to a stalemate? So suddenly it changed to a very black and white situation from Ukraine cannot lose this war to can Ukraine win this war? And the narrative about the European Council that will start tomorrow, which obviously talks about a 50 billion support package for Ukraine, as well as the opening of negotiations about EU membership. And it's presented as a make or break moment. So if not tomorrow, then when? Whereas I think if you zoom out a little bit, the support for Ukraine in the West is still quite high. Yes, okay, in absolute numbers, it's shrunk a little bit over the past few months. But I don't think it's a make or break moment that will break all solidarity with Ukraine in Europe. There is quite a strong fundament, I think.
So what happened? André, do you recognize this narrative of make or break at this moment?
I think, again, we wouldn't disagree here. So I think that if not now, the next European Council is in March. So it's not that the question is really that much of an existential at this very moment. Mm-hmm. But obviously, as I mentioned, in Ukraine, the time is counted with human lives, which we obviously know that Russia doesn't care much about, or its leadership, definitely. So that is the biggest issues. So the sooner, the better for Ukraine, because also for Ukraine, looking long term, you have your strong foothold in this European, now EU in particular, bureaucratic, technocratic machinery. If you get inside, it gets much easier, and you can refocus on other pertinent issues. Because imagine if, let's say tomorrow, Orban is, probably he is successful in vetoing something, or they don't get it agreed. It simply gives more time for Ukraine to invest in something that it should not necessarily do. It should refocus, for instance, on what it does with the global south now. Having more grander, being that player that connects the bigger picture. So the Met being involved with its closer friends takes its time, takes its resources, takes its effectiveness. So in a sense, but it also perhaps phrasing it like it was introduced, maybe it's also in a way a smart position to do it, to get that urgency. Because we understand, we see that people get, again, increasingly fatigued, whether you want it or not. Maybe not fatigued, but it's simply this 7-second YouTube culture. You cannot maintain your attention span for a longer period of time. So this is one of the ways, perhaps, to show the urgency why it's so important for Ukraine.
We will go back to the geopolitical angle in a bit, but I just wanted to, we just heard Jelle say that in Europe we're not able to manufacture the weaponry as much as we would like, or as quickly as we would like, because we're dealing with all kinds of problems. Why is Ukraine, has Ukraine the same problems, or how is it? You told us that they were building up their military-industrial complex. Is that going as well as?
Yes, I tried to present in a nutshell, because obviously it requires a separate discussion. So one thing, as we both today mentioned, it takes years to decades to really build up. And let's recall that Ukraine, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it had the second strongest military capacity, well, on paper it was phrased like that, in the whole of Soviet Union. Then different memorandums came in, the nukes were given away, planes were cut, things were destroyed, obviously, because there should have been some safeguards against Russia attacking Ukraine, which we know now never would have worked anyways. But Ukraine, so it was self-inflicted in a way, but with the help of those who should have been the security guarantors and providers for Ukraine. So no memorandums, no kept. So that's a bigger problem. And then you have to rebuild the whole machinery, which Ukraine nowadays is trying to do. But there are few things that's even more difficult than for Europe. Missiles are always falling on factories. You need to rethink where you put them. So if Rheinmetall from Germany wants to build, now you need to ensure that the factory will not be destroyed, or the facilities and infrastructure. People who apparently at the beginning of the war there were few attacks. The last practical example on these kind of factories with the military capacities. These factories were destroyed, so you have like 3,000 people, let's say, without a job. The question is for Ukraine to keep them on the territory and working and not going abroad. Because perhaps in their skill set, a lot of countries might be interested in it. So the plethora of these kind of crucial steps. Ukraine is trying, it's invests. You see these examples where the drones on the sea are able to attack the ships. They try to innovate. There was some capacity, but again, a lot of old self-inflicted things happened in the past. And now to have a very speed-up process, it's extremely difficult.
Yeah. And can we compare like the war economy as you see it in Russia with what is happening in Ukraine, or it is really difficult?
I think what Ukraine has suffered from is also the delays because of political processes. So first, when the war broke out, we started in the West supporting Ukraine with helmets. It was helmets. Then the next step was ammunition. So for every step, for long-range ammunition, long-range artillery, tanks, then F-16s, there was always this political process, and it's not, as I said, it's not a problem of political will, but this is just, you have a European Union with 27 member states who all have their own parliaments, so it's the political process Of course, Russia doesn't have to deal with that. But the result is that you see that Ukraine got not they got military support, but it was not enough every step. So it took too long, and of course this cost lives on the battlefield. And then one thing that you always hear when Western countries support Ukraine, they say something like, "Yeah, whatever it takes, or as long as it takes." But I think they are also afraid to have a vision of as long as it takes to do what? What is the end goal? Ukraine has a military plan. Zelensky wrote about it in The Economist recently, the commander-in-chief, that they can win this war by technological superiority. So it's up to the West to follow this plan, basically.
Yes. So before we go to the international negotiations, I just wanted to show a little video clip that I recorded yesterday with Floris Akkerman, a Dutch journalist, and he is right now in Ukraine. And then afterwards we will come back to the international stage. So I might duck, I think, or I'll go.
No. So nice that you can be here. Where are you right now?
I just arrived, I think, 20 minutes ago in Kharkiv. After a day of traveling from Sumy to Kharkiv. It was a day that began early this morning because I visited a center where people were staying the night, last night, because yesterday they crossed the border from Russia to Ukraine. And here in the Sumy region is the only border checkpoint, border crossing point, where they can pass the border from Russia to Ukraine, or if you live in the occupied areas and you want to travel to your family, for example, or for what reason also you have to travel from the occupied areas through Russia to this crossing border point. So people are coming there like per day, 1,500 Ukrainians are crossing the border, and they spend one night then after crossing the border in Sumy, the city in northeast of Ukraine. And after that night, they traveling further to Kiev or to Dnipro. So that was the start of the day. So I followed him. The last few days I followed them, and this morning they took the train to Kiev.
Oh, and can you tell me something about the mood of the people you're encountering right now?
Yeah, if I compare it with last time I was in August, and also since the war, this is my 8th time, I see more realism, more pessimism. Because beginning of this year, people were more hopeful about winning the war or ending the war, of beating Russia. Because last year you had the liberation of Kherson, you had the liberation of Kharkiv area. It was in the months before the counter-offensive, people were hoping this could be our breakthrough, this could be our momentum, maybe we can change the war. But they see that's not happening. The counter-offensive was not so successful as they hoped. So that's for one reason that they are more pessimism, more realistic. Second reason is that they see the troubles in the United States of foreign aid, financially, military. They see that the European Union is struggling with unity to support Ukraine. So they are well aware of what's going on in the world, and they feel that this matters for them, and that the world is now not that united as it was 1 year ago, and that it was so easy, I would say, to get money from the European Union, from Brussels or from Washington. So they see that things are changing. And the third point why they are less optimistic is that they see in the first year of the war, Russia made a lot of mistakes. So the army of Russia was not prepared. So maybe in this first year, it was the chance to beat them. But now the Russians, in the second year of the war, they learn from the war. They change the strategy. They change the way they are their tactics. So and they have settled themselves more in the occupied zones. So it's more difficult to beat them than a year ago.
Yes. And do you feel that they also feel abandoned by their allies, or would you not go that far?
No, that's maybe too far yet. It depends on what's happening this week in the European Union and in Washington. First of all, I met people who thanked me or the Netherlands for support. So that happens. So still, people are still aware that there was support. There is support. The Netherlands with this coalition of F-16s, for example. There were soldiers coming to me in a restaurant in Sumi, thanking me for that. I said, well, you don't have to thank me for that because it's Mark Rutte who did it. And another lady, a business lady, said to me, thank you for, or not me, but European Union for all the help. But they are aware that this is some kind of point that it might slip away. That's for sure.
Because can you give some examples that you've seen yourself, maybe where the international support really made the difference, or is that something you can pinpoint, or is it all very vague? When you
no, not in the area where I was, because there is no international help. In the Sumi region, that's close. That's the region which is next to Russia, and there is no financial help. I spoke with a lot of entrepreneurs whose businesses are in trouble now because their buildings are being destroyed by Russian bombings, or people have left because of they went to the front line, or they went to the western part of Ukraine, or they went abroad. And so there's a lack of financial support from them, from inside of Ukrainian banks, from the government, but also they don't see here money from IMF or World Bank. So in this area, in this kind of remote area of Ukraine, they don't see anything of directly international help, these entrepreneurs for their business. If you go more to Kiev or more in the center of the country or more in the west of the country, that there will be a different kind of situation.
Yes. So you said that you just arrived there. What kind of stories are you wanting to make this trip?
Tomorrow, the day that everybody is seeing this in the night, I'm going to witness artillery brigade to find out. One of the things are also within the European Union, that the European Union has troubles to deliver their ammunition. They promised a lot of ammunition, but so far the European Union is not capable of reaching that goal. So the big question is, will they feel, in that what you ask, are they feeling abandoned? Do they have enough ammunition? Are they disappointed in the European Union? So that will be the angle of the story which I want to make tomorrow, Tuesday.
Well, thanks a lot. I look forward to reading it. Thank you.
Yes, you can read it in newspaper NSC, and maybe also hearing it's our podcast, my podcast, which I co-host together with Geert-Jan Haan, Perestrojkast.
Yes, okay, so we've mentioned a few times the American support. Jelle, how I don't have I'm not making it too black and white, but how important is this package, and what happens? What has been happening the last week?
Very important. Of course, I don't need to tell anyone that the US is the biggest supporter if you take it by country base. The US has supported Ukraine up till now with over $100 billion already in all kinds of forms. And of course, historically, not just about the money, but when it comes to European policy, they have always liked to follow the US. So I think there is still a strong coupling between what the Europeans are going to do, what the US is going to do. So in the US, there is now discussion about the support package in the Senate, where Republicans are blocking it because they want promises from President Biden about limiting immigration. So it's really become part of a political bargain. And the same has happened. I'm just moving now to the EU tomorrow. The European Council we already talked about. It's also become part of a political bargain with Hungary, of course. And as we already mentioned, that is a package of $50 billion. So you can imagine how much money is at stake currently for Ukraine. Well, this is essential, of course.
Yes. André, how much do you think that the US and the European Union influence each other in this week?
I mean, it's the joke was not the joke. The joke in parentheses, which I'm just perhaps agreeing as saying that, for instance, individual important decision makers in the EU, like Olaf Scholz, were always looking so if US delivers some weapons, immediately Germany delivers. So it's in a way that this very interesting interplay between the NATO and the EU, the US and its possible allies. So indeed, although I have to be also maybe add some contextual, it seems that while these negotiations are happening in the US, there were trips from the UK, as was one of the countries. Other countries that were voicing to Ukraine that first, they believe that the money will be transferred, and secondly, that there will be other safeguards in place in case it is delayed. So other solutions will be thought, and in the EU, let's say if the Ukraine facility 50 billion falls in the current form, there's always an option to go bilateral between. Of course, again, it's not ideal for Ukraine. More bureaucracy, more individual contacts, but it doesn't seem, again, that like we said at the beginning, it's really like putting that now and it will never happen again. It's simply delaying another time, and time always plays in favor of Russia. So that's the problem.
Yeah. So you mentioned Germany following suit of the US. Germany is the second largest supporters after the US in terms of money. So if we look back at what allies made the difference and how did they what did it take to get them to support Ukraine? Jelle, can you tell us a little bit about Germany?
Yeah, very cynically, I think for Germany, what made the difference, it was the war. Because Germany, for a long time, and also following them, the Netherlands, preferred to keep a very pragmatic relationship with Russia. Of course, there was already a history since 2014 of the war in the East, the annexation of Crimea. In the Netherlands, the experience of MH17. And still, both Germany and the Netherlands prefer to keep a pragmatic line to Russia, if not openly, then behind closed doors. When it comes to energy supplies, Nord Stream as commercial projects. Even after the beginning of the full-scale war, it was still a question mark whether Germany, they were very hesitant in giving their support. Well, as you already mentioned, once the US moves in, Germany moves in as well. And now, as you mentioned, Germany has become one of the most important supporters, which is not always visual, I think, in media. I don't know if everybody realizes that Germany is actually, in the EU, the most important supporter of Ukraine. So it's really one of the front runners.
Very slow to start deliver, right?
Slow to start delivering, but in the end, now in absolute numbers, the very biggest one, with countries also in Eastern Europe, the Nordics, the Netherlands as well, the UK.
Yeah.
Not EU anymore, but.
André, you are affiliated with a think tank that is aligned with progressive political parties. How much of it feels that at the beginning of the war, party politics within Europe or within European nation states didn't matter that much on this topic? Do you feel that that is just a misconception, or do you feel that party politics will have a bigger role in the future, for example, in Germany? Or can you tell us something about that?
I mean, certainly, I would say it was very important from the very beginning, and it will continue. I mean, if you look at the let's continue maybe with Germany and SPD, but we all could mention other sort of social democratic forces that had to undergo a paradigm shift. Again, these movements Many have strong rooting in pacifism, believe that what was that you can build relationship based on economic interdependence, almost like the post-World War II EU project, yeah, where you try to build such a framework that, as the quote goes, that the war makes it materially impossible and unimaginable. So that, but well, you obviously don't have Russia at that for 60 years at that case, which breaks the problem. But indeed, I think that looking at even within individual parties, there's still a lot of individual politicians, groups of politicians that might feel that you need to talk to Russia, or perhaps even on the similar terms that it was. I think it's still important to flag there needs to be a strategy what to do with Russia. The same, I think there's something, at least my subjective perception, there's perhaps, as long as it takes in Ukraine was very accurately summarizing that we don't know what that entails, but many that individual sort of political parties, forces, they don't also answer what is the future of Russia in this security architecture. Is it on permanent exile? And we say that we need to, like a North Korea or whatever, or we need to bring it back. I think there's a lot of contagious issues here, where some would like to sort of reestablish these relationships on some terms. Others, like in Ukraine, they keep constantly hammering and reminding that you had the history lessons, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine 2 times, 3 times, Donbass, Crimea, etc. Why do the Nordic states, obviously Finland, changing even this mindset of being kind of neutral, as well as the eastern flank in general, always saying that the problem is in the making, but a lot, again, in the West, saying that perhaps you're going too far. So this struggle continues. And this is why we see that it's also quite difficult for Ukraine to garner support all the time, because it's playing chess, basically. Elections here and there. Romania now supports, in a year it has elections. Slovakia delivered huge amounts of weapons. Fico, stop. Then Netherlands, question mark, what's next? F-16 planes, it was a sort of a God-given present for Ukraine, so the sort of the disagreement.
Yes.
So there are a lot of question marks.
Yeah. So Jelle, can you tell us a bit about the role of the Netherlands?
Yeah.
We hear the F-16s and Mark Rutte's role.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit before that I think even when they say as long as it takes or whatever it takes, that Western leaders might also be a bit afraid even to think about what it means when Russia has to lose. Well, they are afraid of this scenario, I suspect, because whereas for countries like the Baltics, who of course have a history with Russia, they know exactly what is going on, and also for Ukrainians, they think in a more conceptual way, because they realize that Russia needs to be stopped in a permanent way, because it has a history of impunity, as you said, with Georgia, with Moldova, with Ukraine. So if you just look only at this war in isolation, and you are going to be very pragmatic towards Russia in how to stop this, then in 4 or 5 years they will make the next step. So I think there is some fear in the West to think about this scenario, what they want with Russia. When it comes to the Netherlands, yeah, actually we made a remarkable transformation. I just already mentioned that the Netherlands was basically in the camp of Germany, also because of energy relations, where they prefer to keep a pragmatic line towards Russia. And Mark Rutte, well, I was actually surprised by how big of a frontrunner he became in the EU, because the Netherlands is one of the frontrunners still. Just today yesterday night in the Parliament, there was a debate about support for Ukraine. The Parliament in the new setting after the elections, where Rutte's government has only 40 seats left, I think. And there was actually a parliamentary motion filed that called for reducing the EU budget, and that links to tomorrow's discussion at the European Council, where new money is being discussed for Ukraine. And the Prime Minister said, Mark Rutte, he said, well, even if this motion gets accepted by a majority of Parliament, I'm not going to execute it. So I will go to Brussels and I will vote in support of this money. and if you don't like it, I will step down, and my entire cabinet of ministers will step down. You're probably
So he really tied his faith to this issue.
yes. Well, and of course he doesn't have much to lose as he's already demissionary, but
Might take a while.
might take a while. And then with the new, probably you're also referring to what will happen with the
Yeah.
new government, the election outcome.
Do you consider Wilders one of those people who refuses to formulate a picture of Russia or
Well,
the future?
he's so his party program reads no more military support to Ukraine, no more money to Ukraine because we need it for our own defense. He's already showed during the election campaign that he's willing to park a lot of his topics when the new coalition deal contains some of his most important topics, which are not Ukraine, I think. So let's see the outcome of it. Now we don't even know what the next government will be, so it's a bit of speculation. I don't think Wilders is pro-Russia. So I don't think the election outcome in the Netherlands is the biggest concern for Ukraine right now, amid everything that's happening in the US and tomorrow at the European Council. But, of course, it's unimaginable that if he becomes prime minister, the Netherlands will still be a frontrunner. Whatever compromises are made with the other parties, they will not be the frontrunner as they are today. And this is very important, mostly symbolically, and to encourage other European states to keep supporting Ukraine. So the Netherlands will be one of those countries probably tagging along with whatever is the average.
Yes. But tomorrow, Mark Rutte is still representing the Netherlands in the EU. So there are two different things on the table: the financial support package of 50 million and a discussion of the advice that the European Commission made on this November the 6th. I think when they recommended the talks to start talks about Ukraine becoming a member of the EU. André, you just mentioned in your speech that there is no future for Ukraine without entering the European Union. Why is it so important for the future of Ukraine?
Well, I think overall it's good again to look at our vocabulary. I agree not to be absolutist in a certain term. So I think indeed it's quite existential to be part, but there are different modalities, different ways of getting there. I think the focus on fast track is a bit maybe misleading for a lot of people in the sense that even if the accession is open, it's still a long way to go. We had an informal chat where on average it's like 5 years, on average, but for many countries, some in the Western Balkans would probably now...
Been waiting for years.
Exactly.
Over 10
we
years.
have having quite a, like, 5 years, I would be super satisfied. So in a sense... I think what I debate in many or discuss with many colleagues in different settings is no one really now negates the notion that Ukraine is already kind of part of the European family. So it's not a matter if, it's more a matter of when and on what kind of conditions and how, etc. So that is already a big success for Ukraine. Obviously, but the devil is in the details in this case. So again, you fight your battles, you win one, you lose one, but again, the time, it's simply by doing what is happening now in terms of these political games and attempts of political blackmailing, it simply serves the aggressor. This is the reality of this specific war, that one side can wait as long as it wants, the other side does not have that time. So for Ukraine, it's simply crucial because it's, on whatever documents you look, even the discussion that the Americans make on the new German Marshall Plan, the think tanks, etc., they always link the success of Ukraine's post-war recovery to EU path. It's almost ingrained in recommendation that it should be linked in one way or another. It should be an integral part of it. So I think everyone recognizes it has the safeguards. It gives the civil society the necessary instruments to monitor the government, because obviously, again, people like Orban, which is a joke, try to bring up the corruption arguments. So the men are on fire, screaming. And in that sense,
So how should Ukraine deal with that? Should they engage with those accusations, or how is it What do you think that it should?
The best is to simply deliver work. So if you know you have to do your homework in terms of reforms, you have an idea where you move as a society, and Ukraine has that. You simply deliver, side by side. And just maybe one message that I think I would like to also to communicate, that I think it's increasingly after these 2 years, after that my presentation, that Ukraine should move into that new dimension where it shows certain independence. It needs to still rely, but I think the more it shows that it can do things on its own, the bigger it will support it gets. If the people show, all right, Ukraine is doing its own drones, its a military industrial complex is working, they are doing a lot on their own, so we're willing to support them. So it's important, even if it's a false, but change to that mindset that Ukraine is a patient on a needle constantly. While it actually shown that but the amount of weapons it has, it inflicted a proportionally much bigger damage to Russia than vice versa. So with the minimum resources it already does, it goes into a counteroffensive without planes. It's unimaginable if you look at the doctrines of. So now moving from that nice sort of stage where everyone was enamored, in love with Ukraine's image of a bravery, now it's unfortunately the hard work that, but you go on with it. You deliver, and I think, again, governments, fortunately, in the EU, still the government change. We have democracies, not in the case of Russia, so even the unfavorable situation, there's still some light at the end of the tunnel anyway.
Yes. So his name has been mentioned a few times, Viktor Orban, and he calls the peace strategy, his peace strategy, he is in favor of a peace strategy, and he calls unconditional support foolish. Jelle, how should we understand his aims at the summit of tomorrow?
Yeah, well, what is about this peace strategy? I don't think anybody really knows what it is.
Does he know?
I don't think so. It's a cynical political game that he's playing. There's a few reasons why he is doing what he's doing. He has relatively good ties with Putin. Simple as that.
I read today that the diplomats in Washington are actually... so Orban's diplomats in Washington are lobbying with the Republicans. That I found very...
I'm not
even
surprised.
more extreme than...
Yeah. No, I'm not surprised. Actually, a few months ago in Trouw, one of the major Dutch newspapers, there was a big article by the Hungary correspondent about how Hungary, in the center of the European Union, is basically hotbed of FSB spies, Russian spies, which have basically all the room to move there. Apart from that, there is he's always bringing up the energy dependencies or the oil dependency on Russia. It's in a liberal regime, so and the economy is not doing so well in Hungary. So he needs also some things to give to his population. So he's presenting himself as a defender of traditional Christian values, which, of course, Putin is also presenting himself as this person. Now Orban is interestingly presenting himself as the protector of the rights of the Hungarian minority in Ukraine, in Western Ukraine. Whereas yesterday, I think, actually people who live there in Transcarpathia, they wrote a letter that they don't feel threatened by Ukraine, so they don't need to be protected by Viktor Orban. So many people were writing also on Twitter, so who is he protecting? And of course, the many replies were Putin. So, yes. Yeah.
So up until now, Orban has with every package kind of struggled and made demands. Do you think this summit is different? But then in the end, he did support the packages?
I mean, it puts you in a very difficult situation, because it says with blackmailing of such, because on one hand it wants to, well, obviously we've seen the high dignitaries such as Charles Michel, the president of the Council, European Council, or the French President Macron, sitting together with giving attention to Orban. And now, if I'm very cynical, and perhaps it's not nice to say, but in relative terms, Hungary, on the European map, in terms of size, population, its leverage, for Orban, it's a super setting where he meets in Paris with a nuclear state, one of the important statesmen in Europe. So certainly
it's punching above its weight.
Yeah, but it's very cynical. He understands for his domestic audience, they see like it's for those who believe in him, Messiah's going, he delivers on what he says. He's up there top. If Trump comes in, he will shake hands with Trump for 5 minutes, as Trump likes to do on this. So in a sense, I mean, that's the image that, but also now he wants to get the money from the EU so he can address all the mentioned here, domestic economic problems, inflation, and basically everything else. So it's an extremely difficult situation for the EU, because if you give in, certainly he will come back. Because this is what he does. So it elicits all the discussions whether EU needs to reform in terms of some unanimity, which brings and even its issues of its own and challenges. But from what you read nowadays in the last hours, it seems that these negotiations are ongoing. And it seems even the suggestions that he might get away, some funds might be released for him, so he does not torpedo the money and the start of the accession talks for Moldova, Ukraine, etc.
Yeah. So on the one hand, we have people like Orban who say that unconditional support is foolish. On the other hand, you have failure is not an option. If we're trying to think of, if we are not one of those people who are afraid of trying to imagine a future, so on which terms do you think that Ukraine is now or needs to secure support? Like on what kind of time levels is it thinking? Like how short is the short term securing, how mid-term, long-term? What kind of different planes are they planning? Or should they be planning?
Well, I hope, because you have to be inside sort of the team of the president and the parliamentarians to having that understanding of a real strategy that is ongoing. But I'm quite sure that all the different playing fields or theaters that are thinking that here are, obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning, the biggest win is the securing the NATO and EU membership. So you have that goal. But you cannot sit only looking at that and not taking the small steps, small victories as well, and taking whatever you can. So I think for Ukraine, for instance, now very important before the European Parliament disbands for the elections, before Makruta goes away on whatever, bike ride, for instance, or a holiday, whatever. They need to secure things that could be like the Ukraine facility. They need to get a certain 3-4 year planning, so they don't need to come back to it year after year. So, for instance, in these summits, what is being discussed possibly as one of the solutions that also Orban kind of wanted, allegedly, that you don't give money for 3-4 years, but you reassess every year. So again, Ukraine wants to have it. Not saying that it does not want to fulfill obligations, and there should be no conditionality. This is not discussion.
Von der Leyen said, like, accession is merit-based, and the Commission will always defend this principle. Right?
But just secure it. Secure, like, the funding for the 3-4 years, that you have a certain... that you understand the future direction you're moving and the playing field you have. Possibly within the US also getting as much before the real election cycle starts, the primaries begin into full swing, etc. So just monitoring the political map of Europe and understanding where to strike. But this is unfortunately also requires knowledge of diplomacy. And it requires Ukraine currently to be maybe to punch above its weight constantly almost, and look not only Europe, beyond Europe, Africa, Latin America, Asia. So there's a lot of variables. It's an extremely difficult task. That is why I think, but it's learning on the go. I think Ukraine have proven that it can. But at the moment, I guess, to end up with the conclusion, it's also choosing perhaps the priorities, because you can invest your resources as much as you can in certain, so you have to shift them properly in different time frames. So my hope is that sort of the elites make the right choices at the right time.
Yes, thank you. So before we go to the audience, one last question. Jelle, you said that if we will not act to Russia, it will attack sometime in the next few years. Do you think it is naive that there are apparently people, the Republicans or forces in Europe, that think that not just for Ukraine but the rest of the world, that we could get away with not supporting Ukraine as full as we have been?
Yes, I think first of all it's a failure to think conceptually about the values and the free will that we are defending allegedly. And apart from that, Russia has shown previously that it will attack again. It's almost like a rule, and the Baltic states have warned us for it. But the Baltic states didn't have such an important voice in the European Union. They weren't being heard because small countries, and calling for negotiations right now, it depends on what kind of negotiations, but we have had negotiations before with the Minsk formula where Macron was involved, and Russia just doesn't care about these kind of settlements, so you cannot trust their word. So with this regime, there is no dealing, basically. So yeah, I think it's naive to assume that you can strike a deal with Putin right now, and then all will be fine in Ukraine and in Europe. Of course it won't be.
Yeah. One last, maybe annoying question. Like, do you think that there could ever be a point where peace would be more important than sovereignty, or is that out of the question?
Well, for Ukrainians, I think freedom is the key word here, and this is something that is ingrained in their DNA. But I think it's difficult how you define, understand peace, and I can tell you how it's defined in Ukraine. So the typical theoretical academic, you can say that it's positive, negative peace, absence of violence, of the ceasefire. Well, in Ukraine, it's increasingly viewed as peace as the absence of Russia. And so that is why it's so difficult to perhaps even negotiate and garner some support, because this concept of peace as absence of Russia, either it's terrifying or simply too hard to set up different scenarios, too costly on whatever. That is why. So there needs to be probably at some point Ukraine would have to make a decision where it wants to end up in this setting. But I think this positive, tragic but positive outcome is also that increasingly more countries and partners understand that it's Ukraine's decision to do. So my hope is that, again, there are less of political forces, a lot of countries that would push Ukraine into any sort of arrangements it doesn't want to be involved in, because it's always ends up in the same sort of circle, which was described just seconds ago with Russia attacking. And just one last thing, I think even if there's no war in Europe, that doesn't mean that Russia will not act in Middle East. It does. We see what happens now with Israel and Hamas, Africa, other continents, and inevitably the repercussions come back to Europe with waves. So it would be very naive sort of to think that if we delegate something or wait, it does not come back to bite us in the near future in a way.
Thank you. Is there anything, I'm going to ask, is there a microphone in the back? Yes, okay. Is there anyone who has a question? What's your question?
Thank you. I was just here that how you can guarantee peace with Russia. Russia only understands maximum force on our side. There is one means that can guarantee peace, and you saw that also in the Cold War, but it was never mentioned that often also in the media, is the nukes. For Ukraine in the future, if it's part of NATO, ask America to guarantee its nukes, to put it on Ukraine soil, so to give this guarantee to Ukraine, so to make sure that Russia knows the repercussion if they attack Ukraine again, but the repercussion will be on their soil, or will Ukraine in the future also perceive to produce nukes for themselves?
And if you wants to answer this question.
Yeah, that's a very difficult question. Why? Because obviously nowadays these discussions come back in Ukraine, which gave away the nuclear weapons. But I think we end up in a very vicious circle because we almost... if Russia wins, one of the arguments is, again, that to be effectively able to defend yourself, you have to have nukes. That's the only... And with the whole sort of movement, including in the Netherlands, decades ago, on the trying to non-proliferation, etc., we come back again to the world stage where everyone will be panically, from terrorists to quasi-military groups, to everyone seeking possibly the nukes because it's the only effective proven, because nothing else proven itself. So indeed, within the NATO arrangement, it's possibly the best deterrent currently to have sort of the nuclear umbrella. But I'm afraid it also creates a lot of additional problems where the weaker states who don't have nukes understand that they need to start looking for ones, because then we kind of end up in this very hostile world where we fight one another with nuclear weapons, or the ultimate deterrence, move from political to military one.
Yes. In the back.
Yes, thank you, André, for your story. During one of the questions, you argued that to keep and also maybe increase the support from Europe, but also from the States, we need to tell the story of Ukraine being able to keep themselves safe, military-wise. This may sound cynical, that's absolutely not what I mean by it, but your story, thanks again for that, was mainly about success in the marketing side of this war. How would this story be adapted if you would tell it the way you argue, more from a military success point of view?
Again, so I think it's only a snapshot of what could be shown, because it's obviously... I think what you can do now, and again, it's perhaps subjective, looking at what could possibly work and what you can change, is first moving to more a narrative where Ukraine brings added value with its presence in the EU, with its partnership. So it's not only changing, but maybe even targeting the populist narrative in a bit. That's saying that we financed EU from our money, from taxpayers' money, etc. So you show why the importance, symbolically but also practically. Either you go from things like Ukraine as a security provider, because it's now one of the most capable armies, if not in the world, perhaps competing really at the top, because they are battle tested and testing all the weapons from different sides. So it's adaptable, the country, it's innovative, etc. So you need to show it as someone who delivers. It's very popular always in the Brussels bubble that EU that delivers. So you should need to show that Ukraine has, again, the amounts, there are some studies that showing with the military support that it got, the type of advances and successes it got. And it's really a success story. It's tremendous sort of success. So I think it's important sort of to switch from that we needed support, we needed to be on the map. So now we are among these big players, what we bring to the table. So we are not only someone who's waiting for support, but we bring something to the table, and perhaps slowly trying to ingrain that we are now part of the European family. You told us. You recognize us. We fought for it with our blood and with all the sacrifice. You need to support us, obviously, with certain assistance, but we also bring ourselves as a country, as a nation. We bring a lot, and we can contribute from all angles. And it possibly, I think it can help, because then you would maybe get also these discussions that maybe you recall saying that Ukraine does not say thank you enough for the support. They came from the UK, etc. That it's not thankful to, which is, I think, ridiculous, because the amount of Ukrainians abroad that constantly on everyday basis say thank you for all the different support is tremendous. So it's simply, I think it's very difficult also for President and his team to adapt along the way. But maybe they need to work with the European partners again on understanding how they move forward, because if the war goes on for 3-4 more years, you cannot do the PR branding all the time, because even the best of the TV series gets boring after some time. You can revisit them, but you need a break. So in that sense...
Just to add, some Ukrainian I spoke to recently jokingly said, if after this war, the Ukrainian army might be the most powerful, the strongest army in Europe. So the question is yours. Do you want this army inside or outside NATO? It's up to you.
I'm just going to take 2 questions at a time because we're running out of time.
Sure, thanks. Maybe just one addition. I think support is not only about the money and economy, etc., which is a huge deal, but as a Ukrainian, you can see it in human reactions, and it values a lot. A bit more provocative, not provocative, but just question for midterm scenarios. Who could be and in what way ambassadors of Ukraine and Ukrainians per se, not only at the state, joining EU, so it wouldn't become annoying to the rest of it. So as you said, it's about the series that get boring, but how can we keep the interest and understanding?
Jelle.
I think you are best.
Jelle, you're European.
Yeah, but he's also already interested.
Yeah,
He's
how you're interested in Ukraine constantly still.
So maybe I misunderstood, because I thought you said which Ukrainians can be the next ambassador.
Which European countries or, I don't know, representatives could be a good ambassadors of Ukrainians being part of EU, not to get bored.
André, if you have 3 sentences and then you have to leave to get your train, but then Jelle can answer after it, and then I will wrap up. So if you have...
Yeah, I think like in the short to medium term, it's not all doom and gloom. For instance, countries like Spain is quite sort of supportive of Ukraine. It's a strong, institutionally embedded, big country, lots of votes in the parliament, etc. I think the Nordics didn't maybe have enough voice in the past, like the Finns and the Swedes, because obviously they tried to keep a bit on the side of not military involved. But there's a lot of interesting voices that I hear also going to these countries. The Baltics mentioned are increasingly more recognized as not the crazy uncle in the family that always says that something is happening, or crazy aunt, to be gender sensitive. So in that sense, the Germany, obviously, it's a tricky, even now having SPD and the traffic lights coalition problems. France, it's UK, I think it's also, there's quite consensus. It's not in the EU, but still an influential player. And the Labour and the Tories, they both are rather consensus-based on that. So Poland, exactly. So there's sometimes, again, it's a bad story, so you have to adapt.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, please go and run and take your stuff to make it to the last train to Brussels. A warm applause for André Kornichuk. And then it's the honor of... You have the honor to
I
finish answering the question.
I would definitely pick out the Baltics, because the Baltics are very small countries who have a similar history as Ukraine. They were in the Soviet Union until some 30 years ago. They have always been the strong voices against Russia and the European Union, which were never heard, but now they are. But especially the Baltic countries have been so successful in the transformation in just 30 years' time. So they can be the showcase of how little time is actually needed to become a really successful country as part of the European family. So they show the most positive future for Ukraine, because Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, they're some of the best functioning countries in the European Union currently. And just to add, Lithuania has, according to estimates by the Kiel Institute, who counts support for Ukraine, has supported Ukraine as much as France in absolute terms over the past year. So I would take the Baltics as a positive story.
Thanks. I promised you also a question, right? So
Yeah, you did.
you can ask
So
it.
we have
You can
time.
ask it again. Yeah, now we have time.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting Andre, because he has a very good story. I have a question to you, but also to all the people around in this room, because in February, 24 February, the war is 2 years. Last February, we were all on the museum plane in the dam. So my question is, are there activities to stimulate the Dutch people to demonstrate for Ukraine and to make a fist to the politicians that they need to keep supporting Ukraine? And it's not only a question to you, but also to people here, if some people knows initiatives about demonstration. Because I'm also talking with PAX, the peace movement in Utrecht, and we like to support this kind of initiatives.
I hope there are people who are going to voice this. To be honest, over the past almost 2 years, I've been quite surprised by the support for Ukraine, not just in the Netherlands, but among the West. I thought it would decrease much sooner after the war broke out, because people get tired of it, and I still see in all the European countries Ukrainian flags, and people still care about it. So I was actually positively surprised, and as you said, I hope it will go on for a bit longer, as long as it takes, as the Western leaders would say.
Do you know initiatives to organize this from Ukraine side of?
Yes, I can help.
Oh, you can help. Okay.
I think it's a very good question to discuss among each other at the bar, where. Please, Joe.
To the audience.
No, definitely, Joe. If you have any tips, I do have a tip. Namely, next week we have a benefit concert with Ukrainian musicians here at the Balie, and there's still tickets, so you can also come there. I'd like to thank Jelle Baartmans for joining me tonight, and André, of course, as well. Keep an eye on our website for lots of more programs on this war. Thanks a lot for watching.